Pull up Google Maps right now. Or don't. I don't know what you're doing. You might be driving or walking or something that's not practical. But the next time you look at your mapping app, I want you to ask a question. When was this taken? The satellite view of your neighborhood. When was that image captured? The street level imagery on the block you grew up. How long ago did that car drive through? For most cities, the satellite imagery on Google Maps is somewhere between 1 and 4 years old. In smaller markets, it can be much older. Google Street View cars cover major urban areas on a cycle of roughly 1 to 3 years. Rural areas, less frequently. Some places haven't been driven in over a decade. So what's changed since then? Buildings demolished, neighborhoods flooded, wildfire perimeters, new construction, altered infrastructure. The map you trust is a snapshot from a world that no longer exists. And for most everyday purposes, finding a restaurant, getting driving directions, that's fine. But for industries that use spatial data to make expensive decisions, the staleness problem is significant, and it's growing, and until recently, it was unsolvable at any reasonable cost. And that's what today's episode is about. How maps go stale, what it costs, and why the solution looks like thousands of people with consumer drones flying grid patterns on their lunch breaks. I'm Bryce Bladen, and welcome to the Drone Network. Let me give you a quick tour of how the world's current mapping infrastructure actually works. I think most people have a vague sense of it, but I don't think everyone's thought about all the seams here. Satellites. The most global coverage, obviously, but with meaningful constraints. Weather matters a lot. A persistent cloud layer over a region can delay imagery updates by weeks. Resolution is limited at lower cost tier satellites. The very high resolution stuff is expensive and is typically captured on demand rather than as a continuous sweep. And satellite passes are scheduled. A given location might be captured every few days or every few weeks, depending on the satellite constellation and the orbit. Fixed-wing aircraft. This is actually how the best imagery on Google Maps and Google Earth is still produced. Bill, Spexy CEO, used to own a company that did exactly this. Planes with holes in the fuselage, expensive cameras pointing down, flying grid patterns over major cities. Extraordinary quality. Also really expensive, logistically intensive, carbon intensive, and completely unable to scale to smaller markets where the economics of this don't work out. Brings us to Street View cars. An extraordinary project when Google launched it in 2007, and still a pretty impressive one. But the cars follow roads, and anything that isn't visible from a road, rooftops, setback structures, building sides that face away from the street, anything elevated or off-road is invisible to them. And even for what they can see, the coverage cycle means a lot of what you're looking at is years out of date. So why does this matter? If the map is roughly right, isn't that good enough? For navigation, mostly, yes. If you're trying to get to a restaurant, 3-year-old street-level imagery is probably fine. For insurance underwriting? No. A roof that's developed a problem in the past few years, an outbuilding added without a permit, vegetation that's grown to encroach on a structure. These are material to risk assessment, and if the underwriter's imagery is 2 years old, they can't see them. Again, for urban planning, this doesn't work. Cities making infrastructure investment decisions need current data. A stormwater plan designed around a property configuration that's been altered by several subsequent developments is a plan designed around a fiction. For wildfire preparedness, this absolutely cannot work. Fuel load in high-risk terrain changes year over year. A controlled burn in one area shifts the risk profile. A drought year increases dry fuel density. Pre-season planning that doesn't account for current conditions is worse than the absence of planning in some ways. It gives false confidence. So, for property disputes, real estate transactions, construction monitoring, environmental compliance, emergency response, the answer's the same. The value of the map is directly tied to its freshness, its temporal quality. And the current system, built around infrequent, expensive, large-scale capture operations, cannot keep up with the rate at which the physical world actually changes. I've been throwing around some claims about industries being affected by stale spatial data. Let me try and make that a little bit more concrete. In the insurance industry, there's a concept called the protection gap. The gap between what's insured and the true economic cost of losses. In the US, across all natural catastrophe events, the protection gap has been running at somewhere between 50 and 60% of total losses, meaning for every dollar of damage, less than 60 cents was insured, sometimes less than 40. There are a lot of reasons for this gap, but one significant driver is mispricing. Insurers who can't accurately assess risk either price it too high, causing people to go without coverage, or too low, which leads to losses the insurer can't sustain and an eventual market exit. A 2022 study by Swiss Re found that for flood risk specifically, one of the key impediments to accurate pricing was the quality and freshness of the underlying spatial data. The physical characteristics of a property, elevation, drainage, surrounding land use, affect flood risk significantly, and those characteristics change, and they change regularly. I'm not saying drone networks close the protection gap by themselves, but I am saying fresh, high-resolution, standardized aerial imagery is a meaningful input into pricing risk accurately, and the economics of that input have changed fundamentally. Let's talk about agriculture real quick, because that's another big one to touch on. I've covered precision agriculture in the context of a Burgundy vineyard story, but let's zoom out. The global food system has a crop monitoring problem. Satellite imagery exists for agricultural monitoring, but the resolution limitations and weather dependencies create gaps, meaningful ones too. A period of consistent cloud cover over a critical growing region during a crucial growth stage is more than inconvenient. It's the difference between catching a disease outbreak and catching it when it's already spread. The stress signature imaging that caught vine disease early in that Burgundy story, multi-spectral cameras seeing wavelengths invisible to the human eye, that's not expensive or exotic technology anymore. It's available on consumer-adjacent drone platforms. And the variable here isn't the imaging capability itself, it's the freshness and frequency of the capture. A farm that can fly a multi-spectral pass every week during critical periods and compare stress signatures over time is operating with a fundamentally different information set than a farm relying on satellite passes that might be delayed by weather or limited in resolution. And this difference compounds. Early detection means targeted treatment. Targeted treatment means less pesticide. Less pesticide means lower costs, less environmental impact, and, in regulated markets, fewer compliance headaches. The value of fresh data isn't just the information itself, it's what you can do earlier because you had the information. So, if the freshness problem is real and costs are significant, why hasn't it been solved? The answer isn't technology, the answer is economics. Satellites work at a global scale, but not at the resolution or update frequency that high-value applications need. Aircraft work at the quality level needed, but cost too much to operate at the frequency needed. Neither model, plane or satellite, scales down to the size of a municipality that needs its utility corridors updated twice a year, or a mid-size insurer that needs current rooftop data on its portfolio. The cost structure of traditional aerial imaging has meant that only large clients with large budgets could afford frequent, high-quality spatial data. Everyone else makes do with stale maps. Now, what changes with a distributed drone network is the cost structure. Again, not the technology, it's the economics. The hardware already exists. It's distributed across tens of thousands of hobbyists and semi-professional pilots and fully professional pilots. The regulatory framework, the 249-gram weight threshold we talked about in a previous episode, makes those pilots viable operators in urban environments without heavy certification overhead. The coordination layer that turns their individual flights into standardized, comparable, queryable data, that's what the network provides. And the result is that the economics of fresh spatial data at the scale of a neighborhood, a city block, a specific corridor, those economics now make sense for clients that can't or couldn't afford a traditional aerial survey. Again, not a technological leap, it's a cost structure change, and cost structure changes are, historically, how industries get disrupted. I want to close with something that I think frames this a bit better. YouTube didn't solve a technology problem. The technology to distribute videos over the internet existed before YouTube. What YouTube solved was the cost structure problem of video creation and distribution. By distributing those costs across millions of creators who were willing to do it for their own reasons, with their own equipment, for audiences that aggregated into something massive. The content that wasn't economically viable to produce centrally became viable when produced at the edges. That's the analogy I keep coming back to for drone networks. The spatial data that isn't economically viable to capture with satellites or aircraft fleets becomes viable when the capture is distributed across a network of pilots who are already out there, already equipped, and willing to fly standardized missions in exchange for fair compensation. Every map you've ever used has been outdated the moment you opened it. The gap between the map and the territory has always existed. What's changing is that whether the gap has been as it's wide as it's always been, or whether we can build something that closes it incrementally, continuously, and at a cost that makes sense. And that's what I think is actually being built here. Not just a drone network, a freshness layer for the world. It's literally upgrading the world map. Spexagon by Spexagon, drone pilot by drone pilot. I've been Bryce Bladen. This is the Drone Network, and thank you so much for listening. Thanks for being a part of the Drone Network. Subscribe wherever fine podcasts are served to get a new episode every week. And remember to leave us a 5-star review on your podcast app of choice. It helps a lot. Today's show was sponsored by Spexy Geospatial and LairDrone. Learn more about standardized drone imagery built for global scale at spexy.com, that's spexi.com, and lairdrone.org. Thanks again for listening.